Good morning. Okay, so before I start this video segment, I just want to give a quick shout out to the guys over at Copart. They're sponsoring this video series, and it's a perfect fit. This customer car actually was purchased by my customer through Copart as a base for this project earlier this year. It's in great shape. He got a fabulous deal on it, and it's just a great starting canvas for what we're going to do. So make sure if you're doing a swap like this, you give them a look. There's going to be a link in the description, and I'm also going to put a couple of tags just to kind of help people find it. But if you're looking for an engine transmission donor car, it's great. They got a lot of insurance, buyback auctions, even flood cars, stuff like that. If you get a low water flood, it's a great way to pick up an awesome car cheap. And they've got stuff even like this, clean title, just was sold to Copart from an individual, and it's ready to go. So again, wanted to give them a shout out because they're sponsoring this segment, and continuing with the content. Well, we are back here in the shop, back at it again. This is going to be, we'll say, part 2 of the Make Your Daily Driver into an Awesome Wagon series. Once I get this thing back down here. So, last video we left off, the wagon was pretty much up in the air. All the fluids were draining out of the 2.5. And we're getting ready to pull everything apart. Well, since then, the transmission has been pulled off. We got a pair of ZF 5 HP 19s now, and this isn't the 2.5 liter engine. That's over there. Yes, this is the 3 liter. I had a couple of productive evenings and decided to at least get the 3 liter sitting down in here on the engine mounts. Obviously it's a good fit. The motor is a 2002, the car is an 01. Pretty much everything 01 to 02 is identical. 25, 30, doesn't matter. They both run the MS43.1 ECU. It's a good ECU, good engine management, pretty easy to crack compared to the later 45.1 units. There's still a whole lot to do here. The 3 liter engine, as you guys saw earlier, had some aftermarket headers on it. The fitment was kind of dubious. It is in there, but normally you can kind of rock these engines back and forth a little bit when they're just sitting in there with no trans. And right now we are jammed up hard against the heat shields right above the headers on this side down in here. So there's more work to be done down low. I've got a flywheel, a donor dual mass. I do reuse those. I don't resurface them. I've never had a problem. Don't use one that's all ground up and nasty. Don't use one with a ton of hot spots. But if it came out of a car that drove all right with a slipping clutch, run it. Not a problem. Even with a self-adjusting clutch, I wouldn't even think twice. On the front end of this motor, I'm going to be doing a water pump and a thermostat. Everything else actually looks pretty solid on it, so I'm gonna just hold off. The owner of this car, a good friend of mine, is very competent himself, so he can take care of doing a valve cover gasket, oil filter housing gasket later on, should he need it. But basically, excuse me, my order of operations are gonna be, at this point, lift her back up. I'm gonna do the flywheel, the clutch kit, self-adjusting 328. You do need the 328 clutch kit. You can use an 01 330 clutch kit, but just do the 328 kit. It takes all the guesswork out, it fits, it's a little cheaper. The best place to get them is Rock Auto. Again, they're not plugging me for that. It just is. They must have some sort of manufacturer deal with Luke clutches. Their kit prices are absolutely unbeatable for every application. Clutch kit for this car was $168 or something like that, shipped to my door. Brand new, release bearing, pilot bearing, clutch disc, pressure plate, everything. Anyway, done with the digression. After that, I'm going to shove that E46 ZF trans sitting all the way back there. In here, I got to rip off all the shift linkage stuff. Oh, shoot. I left all that stuff in the trunk of my unicorn at home. Well, the car won't probably be done tonight. That's too bad. I got to throw the electric on a charger in case I have to go home and get that. But anyway, trans in, K-member on, shifter gubbins on. I've got that 328 drive shaft. I showed you guys the 2 automatic variants earlier side by side. Sorry, the lift arm's kind of in the way, but you can see that 328 manual drive shaft up there, which again is the one you need for all the fancy swaps. Because it's got the desirable 4-bolt rear end, and it's got the length and the girth for a ZF trans, which is the trans you want if you're going to be doing any sort of power. Otherwise, I'd say go with a Getrag 250, which is a little easier, out of a 323 or a 325. Got my pedal set back here. Power steering pump, you may be asking. Yep, it's a Luke LF30. I totally destroyed the pump pulley on the 330 engine when I removed it, because I'm dumb. So that's just going to be a pulley donor, a brand new Nissan's radiator, upper lower hoses, the expansion tank hose, the little probe for the bottom hose. And here I've got the original ECU, the coated ECU, Brembo .4 fluid, Liqui-Moly, like Lout 540, full synthetic, filter, a new DISA valve. I guess I didn't show you guys that, but the 330 engine, when I pulled the DISA valve out, there is a little pin right here on the factory one that's made out of metal, steel. And this eventually breaks off down here, so this flap will just kind of dangle around, and this pin will slowly back itself out. And I don't know if you guys know, but little tiny pieces of steel going into the intake side of your engine is a bad thing. So typically I'll find those broken off, but the pin is either still completely seated or backed about halfway out. This time it was backed completely out and it had fallen down. There's actually a little groove right around here on the bottom. It had fallen down, it was just sitting in there. So one good pothole while you're hooning, and that would have completely destroyed the engine. So he got really lucky there. New Bear thermostat, new, I think that's a Gaba water pump. Of course, stamped steel fins, gotta have the metal. But a whole bunch of parts to throw in. We are gonna be going with that MagnaFlow exhaust system from the 330, not the stock one. The 330 steering rack from his donor daily driver is installed. That fit straight away, as it should have. You do have to match the pump with your pressure line. You can use each, so you can use whichever pump you want. You can use a 20 or a 30, but you do have to tie the pressure line with your pump. So you can't run a Luke LF30 pressure line and an LF20 pump. They just have different size fittings in different spots. So what I'm doing is using the pump from the donor engine, which is an LF30. Gives you a little bit lighter steering. Most people prefer it. I generally prefer the steering feel of the LF20. He can always go back if he wants, but I'm using the pressure line and the rack all from the donor car. I know it's gonna work. We're good to go. So I left this thing really fully dressed. Everything should pretty much plug and play. There's a couple of little vacuum lines down in this corner for the fuel pressure regulator and for the exhaust flappy thing, which this car doesn't use anymore. So I gotta hook that stuff up. We're doing pretty much a whole new cooling system. So it's gonna be a lot of work yet to do tonight, but well worth it. This is going to be an epic daily driver when it's all done. Well, still a bunch to do yet, obviously, with the automatic transmission shifter cable laying right there. But we see our S5D 310Z ZF, our E46K member out of a 328 or a 330. Some standard trans mounts bolted up to our 3-liter engine. Looking pretty good. I do still have to get the shifter linkage. I have to install my new bushing. I brought the bushing with. The linkage I still have to go home for briefly. I did plug in the electric Fiat, so I'll be able to get home and back. This is not permanently affixed. It's just sitting up there, so I can do some extra stuff before I decide to go home and get the parts that I forgot. I actually just found one other thing that I needed, but I can't remember, so I hope that comes back to me. Otherwise I'm gonna feel silly making 2 trips back. But honestly, so far it's snapping together pretty well. I do still have to put the air conditioning bracket back on the 3-liter. I had to take that off when I was removing this engine from the other chassis, and it's sitting right there. Yeah, so that needs to be done. The engine ground strap right here needs to be affixed. Power steering lines need to be added. Obviously the pulley needs to be changed. We've got our, hard to operate the camera and do it at the same time. This is just a snap together fitting up there. I already have the return line from the rack going back up to the bottom here, and that's just a heat exchanger to cool the power steering goo. Other than that, like I said, we're looking pretty good. None of the mount bolts are tightened on anything yet. I just want to make sure we are all sitting pretty, because when you change this many things at one time, sometimes unforeseen problems arise. Well, the K-member's actually in, the drive shaft's actually in, the automatic shifter is out, the new shifter bushing is in, and got everything clipped in and going. I do still have to do the pedals, I do still have to put in slave cylinder. Next step for me is going to be getting out my trusty 8mm and taking off this really big achy metal thing that holds the key to the fuel filter and the pressure regulator. We've got the non-return fuel line right here, and we've got the little widget here that grabs the vacuum from the engine. I do still have to go look on the donor engine. That little vacuum nipple up there does do something, I think. No, maybe not. This car doesn't even have one. So I do have to find a vacuum cap that's suitably sized and cap that. I wonder if that's just an emissions thing, or exactly what's going on there, but I don't think I can leave that open. There is a hose on the front side of it, but I cannot see where it goes for the life of me. Whew. So I'm not really like ready to start it, but I want to put oil in just before I forget. I've got the replacement diesel valve in place, not bolted in yet, but it'll be enough for a start. I've got the ECU box back together, so it looks like it was always like this. Here's the nipple right here. We're going to cut off when we get the clutch fluid line coming up through that grommet right there. After I get the brake pedal and clutch pedal assembly installed. I have not done that yet. That will be my next thing I do. It's just kind of, it's not fun to do. It's a horrible angle under the dash. It's not particularly difficult. But at the same time I'm doing the pedals, I'm actually going to be doing the clutch hardline, which involves pulling the little dead pedal on your left side and then peeling the carpet back just a little bit and then giving her the old reach around. Once I've poked that clutch line through and it's buried, I'll flip the carpet back over and then I'll shove the pedal assembly, which I guess I can show you. That's out of the car and easy. Ooh. So yeah, here's the guy that actually goes outside of the car. No. Yep, alright. So, excuse me for a moment. This is pretty much how she sits. So it comes right out of the clutch master right there, goes down and over and out, and then apparently, I think I've got two hard lines there, two of the same hard line. I think it just goes to the soft line and then straight to the slave cylinder. So the method actually swapping these pedal boxes out, it's pretty easy. There's just Phillips screws. You're going to take the piece of plastic out from underneath where the steering column is. Then you're going to see one that looks like this, just with one bigger, fatter brake pedal and nothing over here. The aluminum piece is actually the same between the auto and manual cars. The only thing you really have to do is disconnect the brake light switch. Just pull the little electrical connector out of it. And then take the 4 13 mils out of the brake booster area and the one out up top. And then what that'll let you do is it'll actually let you cock the whole thing out, so it removes the brake pedal actuation nub thing from the booster arm. And then you can slide this in the reverse of installation while taking the time to snap this in without losing the snap ring, because you can't buy that from BMW. And at the same time feeding this clutch fluid delivery hose up behind the brake booster into the engine bay. It sounds a little convoluted and tough, but trust me, it's actually super easy. Not just because I've done it 1,000 times. One other thing to look at since we're out here, pardon. This is a Hall effect sensor. This is a late model clutch master cylinder I got. And this is the one you want. This is much easier to wire. This is the one I go over in my oldest videos. If you have the old style cylinder, it means it's ancient anyway, just replace it. So get yourself a 2004 clutch master cylinder from a 330 or something like that. buy this Hall effect sensor. It's not cheap, but it's worth it. And then they sell an adapter lead, which I cover the part numbers on in earlier videos as well. That's gonna plug right into that. And I've showed you guys a couple times how to wire it, but basically it's switching 12 volts with your clutch pedal to the EWS module to let you start the car. So it's your clutch safety switch, which is important. So if you're not paying attention, you turn your key in first gear, you don't drive your car on the starter into your house or something. And then the second one's for your cruise control, which is switching a ground signal to your DME. So along with this hose going up into the engine bay, you have to run a wire as well, a little guy. There's part numbers for these things, but you can find them all over the place on the automatic stuff you're not using in the car. So you don't actually have to buy anything for that. That's neither here nor there. These swaps are, again, they're pretty well documented now, if by nobody else, but at least me. So I mean, you can go back and look at my old videos and stuff like that. But next up for me is going to be the pedal box and the clutch line. I just want to get it wired in enough where I can turn it over tonight, and then I'm going to call it a night and finish it up on Friday here. But yeah, it's never a dull moment here. So gonna keep cracking. I'm not out of steam yet, but it is a weeknight and it's 9 o'clock or something, so the old man in me is getting tired. Well, I've kind of done the bare minimum that I think I need to start the engine. I did put some oil in it. It's got a new filter. It doesn't have any coolant in it yet, but I'm not gonna fire it up for long. Fuel hose is connected. The exhaust is wide open headers. I've got the immobilizer box bridged to 12 volt. I don't know, man. Let's give her a go. It doesn't even have pedals in it right now. Trans is in neutral because no clutch, obviously. I'll take it. We'll finish her up on Friday. Glad to see it runs though. We clearly have big vacuum leaks. It's not surprising. Very little connected yet. No load on it, no nothing. So, but she's in, she runs. Whew. Man. There's still a lot left to do too. The whole cooling system, tightening up. I gotta tighten motor mounts still. Whole bunch of stuff. But either way, glad to see this thing kicking away and almost done.